We don't even know what the temperature is. You can't use satellite data to measure the temperature 15 meters deep in the Indian Ocean. So it takes at least 2 years, but as long as 20 years for the heat latency of the oceans to catch up. Those things are gigantic batteries. They emit radio frequencies and they emit infrared radiation constantly.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Never expected to get to 1,000 subscribers, though. Really, I didn't expect to get to 100 subscribers. So it's kind of mind-boggling in a way and super interesting.
Yeah, and it's also refreshing to know that anybody can do this and take on their own study. You don't have to be an atmospheric physicist or have gone to university as a trained professional. You can always learn something on your own by taking a look at the resources available across the internet right now. Once you understand the key terms and how these graphs work, you can start to go through the data yourself every day and figure it out. And once you realize, hey, there's probably somebody out there that's not even going to be a trained scientist or physicist or astrophysicist that's going to put the actual missing piece in together. This is just how life works.
Yeah, we're hoping. Trying to get more people looking at it every day, you know?
I wanted to talk about timelines for a second because as more people start looking, which they're going to, there's going to be a tidal wave of new people searching out information on this. And as more people become aware, the economy is going to shift anyway because people are going to sell their stocks to try to get prepared for this. So the economy crunch comes along with the knowledge of that this is a long-term event, that we're not going to be a 1 or 2 year in and out. This is going to be a decade longer plus event. And people are really going to be stunned by it. Why didn't I hear about this before? So I better get ready too. So when we're looking out, my personal forecast is 2019-20, these changes amplify to such a degree that, we're in biblical proportion for every storm. And people really wake up and say, something's terribly wrong. It couldn't be CO2. It couldn't happen this fast. And it couldn't be this amplified because they were talking about these changes 100 years from now. It's here now. So there's going to be a grandiose awakening. By 2021, this is where we get into the massive food shortages anyway, which was predicted as we get toward that first field line cancellation that Valentina Zarkova puts in her charts here. Once we get around 2021, 22, we get that first canceling wave where the magnetic fields go out of phase and cancel each other out. I really believe 2021, 22 are going to be the major crop shortages. They're going to shake this planet. And as we move into 2024, we're going to reach that cold time. But then that's when we just start going into the second wave. What gives us a good indication after the first wave is we're in the build of it now, and then it should taper off, and those lines are going to come back, start to recharge, if you will, a little bit, come back more into a stable magnetic field, but then whoosh, they go right out again. So between now and 2030, we have 2 full waves of this. So I'm just curious what you think about the amplification timeline.
Well, I think the next cycle is going to be slightly stronger than the current cycle because of the way the magnetic fields look. But what it really comes down to is what the solar polar north field does, because it didn't flip properly last time, and it's up there folded right now. But now it's increasing in strength. So we have to see if we see like a normal 2-pole flip of the sun during this cycle, or maybe the south pole will go out of phase then also. That would be a very, very terrible sign. But you can't possibly know if that's going to happen for at least another, I'd say, 4 years at the very minimum, because this happens around solar max. So, and that is part of the other reason why we created this channel, is because we want to look at every little bit of the solar data as closely as possible during the minimum to try to get some kind of insight into what it's going to do.
Everybody's looking for different comparisons on how strong the cycle 25 is going to be. And again, everybody's input into forecasting out as to where the solar intensity is going. But mine was just more about a in general economy and crop loss timeline that you might foresee based on all the solar activity declines. But you say you think that solar cycle 25 might be slightly stronger than 24. Well, that'll bring us right back into more stable weather versus tanking and going the other direction where these magnetic fields go out of line.
That will be optimal if that happened. But
that would be optimal.
Here's another thing, though. Cycle 24 is a very small cycle, no matter how you cut it. And the thing about temperature is that temperature lags a solar cycle. I say 2 years. Ben Davidson says 3 years. And some other folks are saying 20 to 25 years. And this has to do with the latency of heat in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's another variable not figured in properly with IPCC5's climate models. So the problem with measuring the atmosphere to determine what the temperature of the planet is that it has nothing to do with what the temperature of the planet is. You can't measure the atmosphere to figure out the Earth's temperature.
And if you thought changes like these were limited to today's world, the fate of Rome, climate, disease, and the end of an empire. This book is a sweeping new history of how climate change and disease helped bring down the Roman Empire. An interweaving grand historical narrative with climate science, the fate of Rome was decided not by emperors, soldiers, and barbarians, but also volcanic eruptions, solar cycles, climate instability, and devastating viruses.
You have to have buoys that are measuring temperature at like 15 meters deep all around the world's oceans. And we don't have that, which means we don't even know what the temperature is. You can't use satellite data to measure the temperature 15 meters deep in the Indian Ocean. So it takes at least 2 years, but as long as 20 years for the heat latency of the oceans to catch up. Those things are gigantic batteries. They emit radio frequencies and they emit infrared radiation constantly. Let's say the solar minimum of cycle 24 is today. The coldest temperatures aren't going to show up until 2021 in February, according to me. According to Ben Davidson, 2022. And according to some models, like 2040 or 2030, coincidentally.
Coincidentally for ADAPT 2030. The Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, too. They never talk about AMO or Atlantic water temperatures on a 60-year cycle either. That's a natural cycle. And here it's cooling as well. So these next 30 years, the Atlantic's going cooler on a natural cycle.
And England is absolutely the canary in the coal mine.
It is right there on the edge.
When I first started studying, quote, global warming, end quote, it was in 1987 in 8th grade Earth science class. I guess I'm dating myself now. What I discovered was even back then, it was a known thing that there's a negative feedback associated with global warming. If you heat up the Arctic warm enough that it interferes with the, whatever you want to call it. It's called a whole bunch of different things, the AMOC, North Atlantic Oscillation, whatever you want to call it. If that gets disrupted, most of Western Europe freezes. So if you see the Thames freeze, that's a very bad sign. And, I remember coming home from school one day and saying, hey, parents, you ever hear of global warming? No, what's that? Well, I found out today that it causes global colding, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And they were like, what? So, I've been studying this stuff formally since 1987. I may not have a degree in something like atmospheric physics, but I'm more interested in cosmology anyway. Of course, I live on Earth, so I'm kind of interested in that too. It's such a double-edged sword, David. I don't know which way to go. I'm not sure what to do. I'm so confused.
Well, I think the past leads us to the future. I believe I really do. That's why I'm so heavily looking into the ancient societies and the cycles that they talked about, and then knowing that cycles return and looking at it from that direction. Our crystal ball is truly a history book. We've been through this before multiple times. So last 12,000 years, how many times we've been through this? 30 times already? So it's more of a shorter cycle anyway. Now, when we get into could it be a 2,000-year cycle, more heavy or powerful? Could it be a 3,600-year cooling cycle, more heavy, powerful? That's when, we get into all the extra variables in time. Like how intense would it be at a 2,000-year cooling cycle compared to a 400-year cooling cycle? So I do believe that the ancient writings or ancient texts that we're allowed to see within museums and collections across the planet, visible to the public, hold the answers we're looking for.
Isn't it amazing the way most of the stuff is going on right before your very eyes? You just have to know where to find it in order to actually see it. It's like the idea that the sun doesn't have an internal nuclear dynamo is quite amazing, because if that's the case, then the sun's producing the heavy elements on the surface in essentially plain sight.
Well, that means every other orbital body around in our galaxy would just suddenly, everything we know about everything changes. And that, again, that whole dogma of holding the line there of belief, because once you let that go, wow, people are going to have a very difficult time coming to grips with what their reality is. Truly, when I say that, I mean true physical reality, the way they'll hold it together or not. People are not very happy and conducive to accept new information. Once they've been trained like a sheep, they're very happy to continue with the status quo and dogma as it is. They fear change. They fear new information, I believe, for a majority of people. And that's just the complete opposite for me. I don't like the static. I always like something new, something different. I'm always searching.
Yes, that's good. That's the way to be, man. Use it or lose it. Do not be ossified in your beliefs. Science is a crazy thing, because in my experience, most of the time, when you try to figure out the answer to a very difficult question in science, you end up with about a dozen more questions, even if you got an answer. Does that make sense? In other words, the rabbit hole keeps getting deeper.
And then it goes 12 dimensions wider.
Yeah, I think so. The multiverse exposes itself at that point, right?
Yeah, because speaking of the rabbit hole, I was traveling in Croatia, and we went to this museum in Zadar. This town's about 2,000 years old.
Nice.
And then on the third floor up there on the museum top, they had the ancient cultures that were around, or the ancient civilizations of that area in the Balkans. Now, as I started in the beginning, it was very primal, going back 25, 30,000 years, a few skulls. But then there was a central area there where they had the cult of the sun. And I thought, I never heard about this. Let me dig into it more.
I have a great video for you to watch if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Do a search on YouTube for Is the Sun Conscious? It's a Thunderbolts project video. Ancient cultures just simply believed that the sun was conscious, that it was a god or a goddess. And really, if you look at the way the entire universe is construed, maybe the sun's a nerve bundle. The way the surface of the sun is set up, there's all these electrical connections there. It's not really that different from your brain when you think about it. So there's some weird stuff out there, man. There's too many rabbit holes. You end up with a broken ankle if you spend too much time. And I'm not suggesting that the sun is conscious. I'm just saying that there's some interesting videos about it out there. Although
I will talk about star consciousness for a second, then, if I could throw that point out here.
Yes, please.
In China, in the Daoist beliefs, they call it the Beidou Qixing, which is the cult of the Big Dipper. Now, they believe that is where the seed point of consciousness originates from, is the Big Dipper itself, and the stars contained within.
Huh.
Yeah, and there's a whole, in the Daoist traditions, and they have a set of 36, there's that magic number again, 36 protector weapons that were used to protect humanity. Now, if you look at them, they very much look like zeta pinches or bulge currents coming through.
Oh, really?
And if you start to, what I've really done is I've photographed the entire collection. I've tried to put it together more or less looking at, I should say, celestial phenomenon in an electrical fashion. And the representations of dragons, just even now today, they still understand it as plasma. Like the representations that you see, especially on what I've noticed on temples, is you'll see like a high current flow with the dragon coming in due to how much fire's under the sun. Or if you look on the other side, it's a low current inflow, and the number of sunspot dots on it, and also the amount of flame coming off definitely shows that they were very aware that there were high activity states in the sun and low activity states, but they represented it differently. And then the cult of the Big Dipper and all these things pointing toward pole stars and owls and owl nebula and pyramids within the owl nebula at the seed point of human consciousness. Japan and China are the places you want to go if you want to start looking down star rabbit holes.
Think about it this way. If there's a star, and I'm talking about Daneb again now, we pretty much believe it's between 1,500 and 2,500 light years away. We at least have it down to that margin of error, which is like an 80% margin of error. But nonetheless, it's a little bit far away. The fact that that thing is able to measurably hit the Earth with cosmic rays, how many of those are hitting the sun? How influential is that in the sun's behavior? We're trying to figure out on our channel, but we haven't correlated anything yet, but we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, and imagine the current flow on that one decreases as well. What other effects would that have if it decreases its current inflow? Can you imagine that massive thing having a current inflow difference on it, what it would do to everything else?
Well, the good news about that is, David, is that it does have a constant, it has a constant fluctuation, because the massive object that's firing the jet right at Earth is, people call it a neutron star. I'll just say a massive radio source. That thing is orbiting its host star at only 4.83 hours per rotation. This thing is going around this host star, which is like the size of Jupiter's orbit, in only 4.83 hours. So, like, imagine what the tidal forces would be like.
TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. And there's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. You know, microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds. Oh, jeez. You get ripped to shreds. Your body.
Crazy. And the jet coming out of that thing stretches over 1,000 light years across the Milky Way galaxy and hits you with physical objects. It's crazy. Like, I can't stress it enough. If there's one object that does that, and there's billions of stars just in our galaxy, and there's billions of galaxies, one of those which is a stronger radio source than the core of our own galaxy due to dust blocking Sagittarius A star from our line of sight. How does that figure into things? Is it possible that Earth is the only place in the universe that has life on it? You can't rule out the possibility. It could be a unique place where it's a nexus of all these cosmic rays hitting. And of course, we're getting into some serious conjecture here, but we don't see anybody else out there. Cygnus X3 is a creepy thing. My girlfriend and I talk about it all the time. Like, man, did you see Cygnus X3 picked up in activity? Man, that thing's creepy. Is it going to become our North Star again, like in a sudden cataclysm? I kind of hope not, because I don't want to see that happen.
Is that Charles Hapgood's crustal displacement theory, that the Earth shifts on its crust due to that liquid magma, and that everything shifts 21 degrees, something like this?
Yeah,
Shift.
There are a bunch of different ones, and it's all got to do with pole flips. Keep in mind, when the sun's field-aligned currents get to the Earth's magnetosphere, they split into what's called current-aligned sheets. So, it gets to the magnetosphere, and part of the charge wants to go to the one pole, and part of the charge wants to go to the other pole. This is part of the reason why a negative BZ in that top pane of the solar wind panel we look at every day, that's part of the reason why a negative BZ, meaning a lot of the energy is coming out of the south solar pole, is associated with earthquakes, because that pushes against the Earth instead of getting pulled into the Earth. So all that stuff changes if the pole flips. That stuff's all backwards now. And we have no idea what that would do. There's also a lot of conjecture coming out now, too, that the precessional cycle isn't true. The 24,000 and whatever year precessional cycle where the Earth's axis wobbles. Mm-hmm. Well, part of these new catastrophe cycle theories are that that's not a thing. That happens in a matter of a very short period of time, and then goes back slow the other way or violently switches through both. That's why I'm talking about Daneb becoming the North Star again, because maybe it's not a coincidence that Daneb just happens to point right at the Earth's North Pole.
That is a deep statement to leave on here.
Cheers.
Tell us a little more how we can find you. I know there's a lot of people interested now in hearing more what you have to say. SmAshomAsh on YouTube. Where else can we reach you on the social media, or how can we find a website, any kind of way to contact, anything that you could give out for listeners to be able to more easily find your information?
Well, we do have a Facebook page, facebook.com/SmAshomAsh. We got a Minds page, minds.com/SmAshomAsh. We actually have less subscribers there than we do on YouTube, but I think we're up to about 425,000 views on there. So there's some success coming out of there. Also, we accept donations on PayPal, paypal.me/SmAshomAsh. We have a Patreon account, patreon.com/SmAshomAsh. There's an Instagram page that's a little more personal, a little bit less sciencey stuff on there, but still, the occasional videos of Venus and things like that. That's pretty much it. Mainly the YouTube videos, because it's very time consuming and we're trying to increase the production value and everything one step at a time, so we don't do too much. Trying to stay super interactive with the people who are commenting, answering everybody's questions as much as possible, looking at every possible detail. Occasionally we'll add a section. A month ago, somebody asked us to start covering volcanoes, so we do a volcano rundown every day because it is related after all. We'd like to thank you especially because you've probably done more than anybody else to increase our subscribership, so we really appreciate that, David, and it's we're referring people to you regularly as well, as you are one of our officially endorsed channels, of course.
Well, it's all about sharing the information. We're all in this together. And as I've said, there's nowhere to run. When the more information we share, the more we can prepare for this together and find solutions. So, this whole world paradigm of, protect what you got, don't let anybody keep it, everybody's going to steal from you. You got to completely rethink everything. Now it's a sharing economy where this type of information is the true value moving forward, because these changes can onset rapidly. You talked about the glaciation onset. There is so much peer-reviewed research out there saying that a full-on glaciation cycle can onset in less than 10 years. I mean, imagine how quickly some of these other solar phenomenon can onset here as well, because we're in new territory with the sun in terms of where it's going, the magnetic field's moving. It didn't do that in the Maunder minimum. So we're in a whole new set of variables this time too. So these onsets could be instant or, extremely rapid in terms of months or years. Not hundreds and years and centuries, like millennia, like they teach us in the books.
As we say on our channel nearly every day, when you look at that Gong 2 data, the magnetic environment can change with absolutely zero warning. So there's not a lot of predictive value in it. You got to look at all these other variables to try to figure out what it's going to do magnetically. And while you're able to predict it sometimes, other times, a reverse polarity sunspot comes out of nowhere and you weren't expecting it. But, at least if a nova happens and you watch our channel every day, you may have a few extra hours to prepare for it.
That would be nice. I could use every second I could get if that event happens.
And also look on the bright side. We're on opposite sides of the planet. So if the planet stops rotating, one of us will probably survive.
That is true. And again, come back to these extinction level events where there's larger animals on the planet. Something happened to wipe out the larger animals across North America. It's the same thing when these planetary events happen. One side of the planet seems to get the brunt of the punishment, if you will, and the other side seems to carry on the civilization or the flora or the fauna of the world, and then it repopulates everything. Nothing ever goes to zero. We're not into an extinction event where all humans are going to disappear, but billions will. That's a discussion for another day, but that's why we're bringing the channel. And that does take a lot of time to do all these videos. When you hit that on the head, it is time consuming. We're saving you time and presenting information you would never be able to source yourself. That in itself is true value.
I love
the time and the sourcing of the info to compile it for those viewers and listeners out there.
I love the long form conversation, by the way, too. It allows everybody to, not be taken out of context, not be trying to say sound bites, not worried about compactness. I tend to talk fast on my morning videos because there's a lot of data shoved in there.
Certainly is. Data feed with groovy tunes. If that's the style you like, then SmAshomAsh channel is for you.
Thanks, man. I guess I got to upload some more. We got hundreds of tracks in here, so got to start marketing those a little more too. Put them on SoundCloud, and you can check out soundclick.com/goldencatproductions. You can stream or download tracks there also if you like.
Good one, because the YouTube sound library is limited at times, so anything else that's out there. And as well on my channel, I have the Grand Solar Minimum resources page on oilseedcrops.org, and I'm just reworking the website. So it's stripped down to bare basics. I was going to strip it down and then bring it back up again. But at the moment, there's about 100 links inside the Grand Solar Minimum resource page that can get you out to some of these same feeds that Daniel's looking at, as well as others that I haven't included that he has on there with the solar wind polarity, etc. I've been talking with Dan Nigro from SmAshomAsh. I'm David DuByne, your host from Adapt 2030. We're going to sign off right now, but Dan, any last words before we go?
Thanks for having me. Onward and upward, and stay in touch. Don't be a stranger.
Hope everybody took this information to heart and do your own research. This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.